We take you now to Chicago and Paul Harvey.
Good evening, Americans. We are just never ready for this kind of thing in this country. We deplore the hotheads elsewhere in the world who change governments with guns, but we try to ignore the fact that now 4 of our own presidents have been cut down by assassins. It had been such a tremendous welcome at the Dallas airport and all along the parade route that Mrs. Kennedy, who had become perhaps his greatest political asset, turned to her husband and said, "You can't say Dallas wasn't friendly to you." Moments later, in the back seat of that open car, she cradled her husband's bleeding head in her arms, saying, "Oh no, oh no." Top speed, it was still 5 minutes to Parkland Hospital. Mrs. Kennedy did not collapse, no hysteria. When she entered the hospital, her chic fuchsia suit was covered with her husband's blood. President Kennedy, within 30 minutes, was dead from a bullet in his brain. There was another wound in the president's neck, which could have been from the same bullet. Mrs. Kennedy's wish was to return to Washington immediately to be with the children. The bullets, by now you know, came from a warehouse window. On the 5th floor, police found the remains of some fried chicken and some paper. The assassin had waited there for some time. And a Mauser rifle with a scope sight, 3 cartridges fired, 1 still in the chamber. Dallas policemen advised that a suspect had entered a theater in the Riverside section, chased him there. There was a shootout. 1 policeman was killed. The suspect was captured, Lee H. Oswald, at 24. They dragged him from the theater screaming. Evidence is piling up against him. He was employed in the building where the murder weapon was found. Lee H. Oswald traveled in Russia in 1959, married a Russian woman, renounced his American citizenship, tried to apply for Russian citizenship. And it's significant to me that Moscow radio today hastened to say that our president had been killed by extreme right-wing elements. Now it develops the assassin's allegiance was red. He wore a brown shirt, uniform of a Castro-communist terrorist, and he, Lee Oswald, is chairman of the pro-Castro outfit called the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Governor Connolly, with a bullet through his back that came out his chest, fractured his wrist, underwent surgery. He is conscious, condition good. Vice President Johnson, who was riding in a separate car a considerable distance behind Kennedy's, was unhurt. Lyndon Johnson is now President of the United States. Within less than 2 hours of the president's death, aboard the presidential plane in Dallas, Johnson took the oath of office sworn in by a woman judge and then took off with the widow and the body for Washington. When the first news came today, before it was even confirmed that the president had been killed, a flood of sell orders hit the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. They rang the bell, closed down for the day, but before they could, industrials had plummeted $21. And the commodity exchanges closed down, and Congress recessed, and sporting events most everywhere scheduled for tonight are canceled. Pope Paul, advised, went to his private chapel to pray. General Douglas MacArthur, in a telegram to Mrs. Kennedy tonight, said, quote, "I realize the utter futility of words at such a time, but as a former comrade in arms, his death kills something within me." The president's special car has a bulletproof bubble glass top, but the top was down today so that he could wave to the enthusiastic crowds. The Dallas reception was the most enthusiastic of any stop in Texas. For weeks, a big debate raged over who of the city's luminaries would get to sit at the head table this noon. Nobody did. And on the president's White House desk tonight are the calls and the callers and the documents and the urgent things to be done which could not possibly await his attention for another day. But they will wait now. It is for us that one must grieve tonight. For a generation which has so refined its intellect that it can split atoms and communicate with the moon, and yet remains at the mercy of its own undisciplined emotions. If the world is one day destroyed, it'll come just like this, you know. It'll not be the H-bomb that did it. It'll be the greed or the fear or the hate that set it off. Paul Harvey, good night.
Here's Paul Harvey, news and comment.
This morning, a man with a weapon was reported on the roof of the Internal Revenue Service building. That roof overlooks the Department of Justice entrance, through which Attorney General Robert Kennedy passes several times a day. Police raced to the red-tiled roof of that 7-story building, found nothing. One officer from the tower of the adjacent old post office building says he saw, on the roof of the Internal Revenue Service building, a man with what appeared to be a weapon, but careful scrutiny has revealed nothing. We will be chasing shadows for a while. Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy went back to his grave last midnight. Accompanied by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, she placed a sprig of flowers on the grave and spent several minutes there. In Dallas, Jack Ruby was indicted this morning. County grand jury has indicted him for, quote, murder with malice. The Dallas DA, Henry Wade, says Jack Ruby shot a handcuffed man. Deserves the death penalty. But San Francisco's criminal lawyer, Jack Ehrlich, the real-life Sam Benedict, says he may defend Jack Ruby, pleading temporary insanity. Texas Governor Connolly is recovering at Parkland Hospital, as doctors had hoped he would. And in Havana, Cuba's foreign ministry says it is true. Lee Oswald, the accused assassin of the president, Lee Oswald tried to travel to Cuba last September, that he wanted to go from there to Russia. Oswald went to Mexico City and applied at both the Russian consulate and the Cuban consulate for permission. His application stated that he had lived 3 years in Russia and that he was a communist. But when they told him there'd be a delay of 10 days to several weeks in processing his application, he angrily withdrew it and returned to the United States. Mrs. Marina Oswald, his widow, is receiving magazine offers for her life story. And in New York, 2 girls watched television yesterday. Johanna Malandroka, 13, and her 16-year young sister, Mary. They watched the honor guard at the funeral service, the precision with which the manual of arms procedure was executed, and they decided to try to imitate it with the rifle and shotgun owned by their older brothers. During their play acting, the 16-year-old girl pointed the rifle at her sister and pulled the trigger. It was unloaded. The 13-year-old girl pointed the shotgun at her sister and pulled the trigger. It was loaded. Time out in politicking. Republicans have agreed to a 30-day moratorium on partisan political activity to give the new president unanimous support. On Wall Street, the stock market opened higher this morning. Buy orders outnumbering sell orders 25-1. President Johnson, promised last night that he would seek congressional passage for that biggest tax cut in history. It is stalled in committee almost certainly until next year, but President Johnson means to see it through sooner or later. The president moved his office to the White House today, meeting with foreign leaders now, foreign leaders who are in this country. Tomorrow he's going to address a joint session of the Congress. One of today's meetings, Soviet Deputy Premier Mikoyan, and I understand Mikoyan brought with him a personal message from Khrushchev for the new president, possibly seeking a summit meeting. During yesterday's Washington reception for foreign dignitaries, de Gaulle was overheard to say to Mikoyan, "You've got to understand that what is good for France is not necessarily bad for Russia." End quote. President de Gaulle is going home now, but he'll return to the United States next year to try to bridge the differences which recently have divided us. Well, here we go again. Marquette University students say they're going to dribble a basketball around Lake Michigan. From Kalamazoo, Michigan to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They'll keep the ball bouncing until the Western Michigan-Marquette game December 7th. In the spotlight, Chicago's Blackhawks are becoming the New York Yankees of ice hockey, developing individual excellence. Of all the leading scorers in the league, the Hawks now have 3 of the top 4 and 6 of the top 10. Today's Wall Street Journal comments editorially that many Americans have yielded to the hysteria they charge to others. That many Americans have yielded to the hysteria they charge to others. Many Americans, including commentators and congressmen and churchmen. A senator who sought to indict, quote, the people of Dallas. A Supreme Court judge who prematurely and erroneously blamed rightists for the president's killing. A newspaper of renown which blamed everybody. And the Journal goes on today to say that a dictator A dictator must move everywhere, secretly, and under heavy guard. But an American president is dead because he was so generally beloved and so universally respected by loyal Americans that he moved freely among the people. That the police did not check every window only because for so many years our presidents have moved freely among our people. There have ever been madmen in the world, but that does not discredit a city or a system. It is more than nonsense to say that the good people of Dallas, crowding the streets to honor a president, share a Marxist murderer's guilt. That's the essence of today's Wall Street Journal editorial. May an analyst analyzing the analyst said, just this word of my own, I've always known that we have a big league team of newsmen in Dallas generally, and at WFAA particularly. I trust everybody knows it now. Here is a potpourri of the day's news from page 3. Lawrence Welk, recuperating from abdominal surgery in Santa Monica, is doing fine. On the medical front, the government of Canada is launching a nationwide campaign to discourage cigarette smoking. The federal government of Canada decrees that the case against the cigarette has been proved. Incidentally, college newspapers have been thrown for a financial loss by the fact that cigarette advertising has been eliminated. Some have had to cut down the number of pages, but all have survived. I'm talking now about college newspapers in our own country. But you want to walk safe? You want to walk safe, stay in Paxton, Massachusetts. I learned today that not one pedestrian has been killed in Paxton since the town was incorporated in 1765. There's a classified ad in today's London Times, says, quote, Christine Darling, sorry to miss our wedding date. Busy seeking change of advertising agency, wed you later. Signed copywriter. Bloomington, Illinois Pantagraph was first, I think, to urge that Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy be made a sort of secretary for culture in the Johnson administration. There has so far been no official indication that she will be. From maternity hospitals across the nation comes word today of scores of new babies named for the late president, 20 that I know of in just Minneapolis and St. Paul. Oh, FYI, the FBI is reported positive that Lee Oswald killed the president. But the FBI, to intercept any possible doubt which might becloud history, is building all available evidence into an irrefutable case. And President Johnson has promised that all of the facts which the FBI is presently uncovering and putting together will be made public. Paul Harvey. Good day.